Welcome back for our last installment in the beginning gradebook. This is Excel for Educators, and this is part 2 of lesson 2, where we're going to be building or adding some Sparklines to our gradebook to help visualize student data. Just a reminder that you can download this workbook that I'm using at the address shown on the screen. Okay, let's get back into things. Where we last left our reporting tool, we had used the index and match function in order to draw student data. We also added a data validation cell so that by changing the last name of a student, we could update the information for any student. Now we're going to build some small charts or sparklines to fill in these cells. We're going to start that by going back to our scores report and organizing some data for both the students and something that tells us about what at standard performance means. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to build another little data table kind of underneath our scores, and this will be a dynamic table that will update just like the report card tool will. And the reason why we need this is so that we can build a dynamic chart for our scores. So I'm going to use an index match function just like I did in the previous session. So we're going to use index. And this time what we want to index are the scores themselves. So I'm going to highlight that range, and I want to match it with our cell on the report that has the student's last name. You might remember that was C4. And our range of names we just called last name. We want an exact match. Enter, and we're good to go. You might remember our fill tool here from the very first video in the series. If we pull that over, I'm just going to do a sample here, you'll see that we get some errors. What's going on here? Well, if we look at what's going on up in the formula bar at the top, what you'll see is that as we scroll through here, the cell that's associated with the report is changing. We want C4, it's becoming D4, E4, F4, and so on, and this is throwing off what we have going. So instead, we need to tell Excel that this cell cannot change. This reference must be absolute. It can't be relative or shift when we use the fill. In order to do that, we're going to press F4, and that puts those little dollar or string signs there and locks the cell. So now when we use the fill tool, we get the right reference. So this is going to be for a student score. I'm just going to put a note to myself here. And then I also want to put a note here about what standard performance is, and this will be important for the graphs as well. Since a level 3 meets the standard, I'm just going to select that and then fill all the way across, and everything's going to be a 3. Alright, so let's go back to our reporting tool. We're ready to build the charts. Click anywhere outside of the reporting tool, go up to Insert, and the first thing we're going to do is a little line chart for all of the scores for a particular student. So I'm just going to select the first one. It's empty because I haven't told it what data to use, so I'm just going to hit the Select Data button. I'm going to go back to our scores, and I'm going to tell it to use these scores. This is the very first standard that we're going to report in there. We have what the student performance is and what the at-standard performance is. Alright, I'll hit OK, and we end up with a very ugly chart. But fortunately, there are a few things we can do here to clean this up fairly quickly. First of all, I'm going to click on the legend and hit delete and get rid of that. I'm also going to get rid of the horizontal axis labels. I don't need to know that there were 7 assignments. Grid lines you could eliminate. The other thing you can do is you can lighten them, which is what I usually do. So I go for a solid line, but I want them the lightest shade of gray. So they're very pale but present if you need them. On our vertical axis, I'm going to format this a little bit, and it's more important that you pay particular access to the vertical, or particular attention to the vertical axis. And the reason why is that it's really easy to copy these charts, and you want the size of the chart to remain the same. So change some of these things to fixed. 0 is fine for the minimum, that would be our 0 score. 4 is going to be our uppermost score, and I'm going to change this to 1, just so that we have fewer grid lines to look at. Okay, once I've got that, I'm going to delete it. Now Excel knows that the information is there, it's just not going to show it to us. The last thing I'm going to do is clean up these lines a little bit. going to format the data series so that we have a nice black line for the student scores. And then I'm going to select the red line here, which is our at standard performance. And I'm going to change its color too. I want it to be a little bit darker. But I also want it to be a little bit thinner. It's not the star. The student scores are the star. Hit close. Alright, the last little tweaks I'm going to make here, I'm going to select this chart, format the chart area, and take off a border, which you can't see now, but you would once it shrinks down. And finally, I'm going to go over to the Format tab, select Size on the very right, and lock the aspect ratio. Why do I want to do that? Because I'm going to shrink down this chart, and as I do, I want the proportions to stay the same. Alright, so now I'm ready to shrink down this chart. I'm just going to go to the edge where they get the little arrow so I can shrink it. And I'm just going to make it small. Okay, once it's small, I'm going to move it into place. This was our chart for the cell energetics. And it's done. If I want to do the same thing for any of the other scores, then I copy the chart. I go back to Design tab and hit Select Data, and now I tell it I want it to do the next set of data. Hit OK. Our chart is ready to go. We don't have to redo any of the formatting. We can just pull it into place. Again, if we check and see what happens when we change the name, you'll notice that the charts will now auto-update for every student. Alright, the last thing we're going to do is a little bar chart here to show growth or progress. So here again, click anywhere outside of the report, go up to Insert, and we're actually going to use a column chart in Excel. Column charts are used for vertical charts. They actually refer to bar charts for the horizontal charts. So we want to do just a basic bar chart. We're going to select the data. I'm going to go back to scores. And I'm not going to pick anything for cell energetics because we only have second quarter grades. We can't show growth. So for cells, I'm going to pick first and second quarter. So we've got the student scores and the at standard work, and OK. Alright, so let's run through a cleanup. We're going to get rid of the legend. We're going to get rid of the horizontal axis labels. We're going to format the vertical axis. We're going to make sure that it stays fixed between 0 and 4, with 1 is the major grid line. We're going to eliminate that. We're going to lighten up our grid lines so they're very lightest shade of gray. And we're going to take our student data and we're going to make it a nice dark black. Oops, sorry, clicked the wrong one there. One more time. So our fill, solid fill, black. There we go. Now for the red, you might remember this is the at standard performance, so we don't really need bars. So when I pick those, or when I select those, you'll notice you can see that they're highlighted. I want to go up here to the Design tab and change the chart type because I want a little line there to show me where at standard performance is. So I'm going to change those to a line graph, hit OK, and now I can format these a little bit. So just like last time, we're going to make this a nice dark red, and we're going to thin it out a little bit. We did 1.5 last time. Okay, other than that, I'm going to select our chart. We're going to take off the border. No line on the border. We're going to go up to Format, Size, lock the ratio, and now we're ready to shrink it down. Okay, once it's down, we can move it into place. And there we are. Again, it can be copied and reused for any of the other data. This one will also auto-update any time that we change the student name. So that's it for this beginner's edition of Roll Your Own Gradebook. You can download a copy of the finished spreadsheet at the link shown there. Come back again for more information on doing slightly more complicated kinds of gradebooks, including integrating scores from different class periods or different data sources.